The moment my brother Truman grabbed the microphone at my wedding reception, I knew something was wrong. His face wore that same smirk I'd seen countless times growing up, the one that always preceded disaster. I'm Rosalie, and until 10 seconds ago, this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Before everyone continues celebrating, Truman's voice echoed through the ballroom, there's something my dear sister needs to know about her perfect Ramon. My stomach dropped. Ramon squeezed my hand under the table, but when I looked at him, his face had gone pale. Don't do this, Ramon muttered, half rising from his seat. What's going on? I whispered, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as 200 guests fell silent, all eyes darting between Truman at the microphone and our table. My mother Valeria was already shaking her head, mouthing no at Truman. Ramon, Truman continued, pulling out his phone. Would you like to explain to my sister about Lexi? Or should I show everyone the marriage certificate myself? The room erupted in gasps. Ramon's hand went limp in mine as the blood drained from my face. Marriage certificate? Ramon? My voice cracked. What is he talking about? He finally looked at me, guilt written across his features. Rosalie, I can explain. He's already married, Truman announced, his voice cutting through the growing murmurs. Has been for 3 years, to a lovely woman named Lexi Phillips in Houston. I have the proof right here. My cousin Eloise was at my side in an instant, her arm around my shoulders as I struggled to breathe. The room started spinning as Ramon stood up, knocking over his champagne glass. It's not what you think, Ramon pleaded. Lexi and I, it's complicated. We've been separated. Save it. I managed to say, my voice stronger than I felt. How long have you known about this? I turned to Truman. He shrugged, still holding the microphone. Long enough to do my due diligence. Someone had to look out for you, sis. Look out for me? I stood up, my white dress suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. You waited until my wedding day to tell me this? I needed concrete proof, Truman said. But something in his expression didn't sit right. There was satisfaction there, not concern. My mother finally reached him, trying to grab the microphone. That's enough, Truman. This isn't the time or place. Oh, but it is, he insisted, dodging her grasp. Better now than after they've signed the marriage license, right? The room was chaos now. Guests were standing, phones were out, and I could hear the whispers spreading like wildfire. Ramon was still trying to explain, but his words washed over me like static. Show me, I demanded, walking toward Truman. Show me this proof. He handed me his phone, and there it was, a marriage certificate with Ramon's signature, dated 3 years ago. The woman's name, Lexi Phillips, stared back at me like an accusation. I was going to tell you, Ramon said from behind me. Lexi and I are getting divorced. I spun around. When? When exactly were you planning to tell me? Before or after we said, I do? Rosalie, please. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't you dare try to explain. I looked around the room, at my mother's horrified face, at Truman's barely concealed satisfaction, at Ramon's desperate expression. Something wasn't adding up. Truman had never been protective of me before. In fact, he'd spent most of our lives competing with me, trying to overshadow my achievements. How did you find this? I asked him. Does it matter? I saved you from making a huge mistake, but I saw it then. The quick glance between him and Ramon, so fast I almost missed it. This wasn't about protecting me at all. I grabbed my bouquet from the head table and threw it directly at Truman's chest. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. You saved me from a huge mistake, but I don't believe for 1 second that was your intention. I turned to address our guests, summoning every ounce of dignity I could muster. I apologize for the drama, everyone. Please enjoy the food and drinks. They're already paid for. I need some air. As I walked toward the exit, Eloise fell into step beside me. I heard my mother calling after me, Ramon's protests, but I didn't stop. In the reflection of the ballroom's mirrors, I caught one last glimpse of Truman's face. The smirk was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like worry. Good. He should be worried. Because as I pushed through those doors, I wasn't just leaving my ruined wedding behind. I was already planning how to uncover what my dear brother and my would-be husband were really up to. You need to drink something, Eloise said, pushing a glass of water into my hands. We'd taken refuge in the bridal suite, where I'd spent the morning getting ready, full of hope and excitement. Now those feelings seemed like a cruel joke. I need answers, I replied, pacing the room in my wedding dress. Did you see how they looked at each other? Truman and Ramon? A knock at the door made us both jump. Rosalie? My mother's voice. Please let me in. I nodded to Eloise, who opened the door. Mom rushed in, her makeup streaked with tears. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. Did you know? I asked, cutting her off. Of course not. How could you think? Another knock interrupted her. This time it was Ramon. Get out, I snapped as he stepped into the room. Just give me 5 minutes, he pleaded. I can explain everything. Explain what? How you forgot to mention you're married? Lexi and I separated 2 years ago. The divorce is almost final. Almost? I laughed bitterly. So you were going to commit bigamy today? Ramon ran his hands through his hair. The papers are filed. It's just taking longer than expected because... Because what? Truman's voice came from the doorway. He leaned against the frame, looking far too casual for someone who'd just blown up a wedding. Get out, both of you, I demanded. Sis, I know you're angry, but... Angry? I stepped toward Truman. You've been sitting on this information for how long? And you choose my wedding day to reveal it? I needed to be sure. Bullshit. I was inches from his face now. You and Ramon are hiding something, and I'm going to find out what it is. Ramon's face twitched. Truman was just looking out for you. Stop lying. I grabbed my phone from the vanity. Should we call Lexi right now? See what she has to say about all this? Both men froze. That's when I knew I'd hit something. You have her number? Ramon asked, too quickly. Not yet, but I will. I turned to Eloise. Can you get these people out of here? Everyone out, Eloise announced, herding them toward the door. Now. Rosalie, please. My mother tried one last time. Let's just talk about this. Mom, I love you, but I need space right now. Once they were gone, I collapsed onto the plush sofa, my wedding dress pooling around me. Eloise sat beside me, pulling out her own phone. What are you doing? Looking up Lexi Phillips in Houston, she said. Social media, LinkedIn, anything I can find. You think she's real? The marriage certificate looked real enough. Eloise's fingers flew across her screen. But something's definitely off about this whole thing. My phone buzzed with a text from Dallas, Ramon's business partner. Need to talk to you. Alone. It's important. I showed the message to Eloise. What do you think? Dallas always seemed straight up, she said, unlike your brother and Ramon. Another knock at the door made me groan, but this time it was the wedding planner, looking anxious. Ms. Rosalie, there's a situation in the ballroom. Your brother and Mr. Ramon are having a rather heated discussion. Eloise and I exchanged looks before hurrying to the ballroom. Through the partially open doors, we could hear raised voices. This wasn't the deal, Ramon was saying. I said I'd handle it, Truman hissed back. And I did. By blowing everything up? You wanted out, didn't you? I pulled out my phone and started recording, but they must have spotted movement because they immediately fell silent. When we entered, they were standing far apart, both trying to look innocent. Handle what exactly? I asked, making them both jump. Nothing, Truman said quickly. Just wedding logistics. More lies? I held up my phone. Want to try again? Ramon stepped forward. Rosalie, whatever you think you heard. Save it. I turned to the remaining guests. Show's over, everyone. Thank you for coming to my non-wedding. As people began filtering out, I caught Dallas's eye across the room. He gave me a subtle nod toward the exit. I need some real air, I told Eloise. Cover for me? She squeezed my hand. Go, I'll keep an eye on the dynamic duo. Outside, the summer evening was cooling off, but my blood was boiling. My phone buzzed again. Dallas asking me to meet him in the hotel bar in 20 minutes. I looked down at my wedding dress and laughed. What better way to get information than to be the jilted bride everyone was talking about? I headed for the bar, already formulating my questions. Whatever game Truman and Ramon were playing, they'd picked the wrong woman to mess with. The hotel bar fell silent as I walked in, still wearing my wedding dress. Dallas was already there, nursing what looked like whiskey at a corner table. He stood as I approached, his face grim. You look like you could use a drink, he said, pulling out a chair for me. I could use the truth, I replied, sitting down. Start talking. The bartender appeared with a martini. On the house, she said sympathetically. I heard what happened upstairs. Thanks. I took a long sip before facing Dallas. What do you know? He glanced around before leaning forward. Ramon's been moving money around. Large amounts. At first, I thought it was just normal business operations, but... But what? Your brother's fingerprints are all over it. Dallas pulled out his phone, showing me a series of transactions. See these transfers? They're going through shell companies that Truman set up. My hands shook as I looked at the numbers. How much? Nearly 2 million so far. The martini suddenly tasted bitter. And Lexi? Ramon's wife? That's where it gets interesting. Dallas swiped to another screen. She exists, but she's not just Ramon's wife. She's also... Well, isn't this cozy? Truman's voice cut through our conversation. He stood at the bar entrance, Ramon right behind him. I slipped Dallas's phone into my lap under the table. Just getting the truth you couldn't be bothered to tell me. Dallas, Ramon said, his voice tight. We need to talk. Actually, Dallas stood up, straightening his tie. I think I've said everything I need to say. You signed an NDA, Ramon reminded him. Which doesn't cover fraud, Dallas shot back. Truman stepped forward. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Dallas turned to me. Check your email. I sent you everything I have. As he walked out, Ramon moved to follow him, but Truman grabbed his arm. Let him go. We need to deal with this first. Deal with what? I stood up, grabbing my martini. Your sister finding out you're both crooks? It's not what you think, Truman started. You keep saying that. I downed the rest of my drink. But you know what I think? I think you're both scared of what Dallas just told me. My phone buzzed. Eloise texting that she'd found something about Lexi. I needed to get out of there. Rosalie? Ramon reached for my arm, but I jerked away. Please, just listen. To more lies? I laughed. No thanks. I've had enough of those to last a lifetime. I pushed past them, but Truman called after me. That money you got from Dad's estate? You might want to check where it really came from. I froze. Our father had died 2 years ago, leaving me a substantial inheritance. Truman had handled all the paperwork. What did you do? I turned back slowly. Nothing that can't be fixed, he said smoothly. If you drop whatever Dallas told you. Are you blackmailing me? At my non-wedding? I'm trying to protect you. Like hell you are. My voice rose, drawing attention from other bar patrons. You're trying to protect yourself. Ramon stepped between us. Keep your voice down. Or what? I challenged. More secrets will come out? Good. Let them all come out. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification from Dallas. Truman's eyes locked onto my screen. Whatever he sent you, he warned, think carefully before you open it. Or what? I repeated, backing toward the exit. You'll ruin another special occasion? Too late for that. Once in the lobby, I ran straight into Eloise. You won't believe what I found, she said, pulling me toward the elevators. Lexi Phillips isn't just Ramon's wife, she's a federal investigator. The elevator doors closed just as Truman and Ramon emerged from the bar. Through the closing gap, I saw their panicked expressions. A federal investigator? I pressed the button for my floor. What's she investigating? Financial fraud, Eloise said. And guess whose company is at the center of it? Ramon's? And your brother's. They're both under investigation, have been for months. The pieces started falling into place. That's why Truman exposed Ramon today. He was trying to create a distraction, make it look like he was protecting me. While actually protecting himself, Eloise finished. In my room, I opened Dallas's email. Documents, transaction records, emails between Truman and Ramon. It was all there. Look at this. I showed Eloise a particular email chain. They've been planning this for months, using my wedding as cover for something bigger. What are you going to do? I kicked off my wedding shoes and pulled out my laptop. First, I'm going to call Lexi Phillips. Then I'm going to make my dear brother and ex-fiancé wish they'd never tried to use me as their pawn. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Smart move with Dallas. Let's talk. Lexi. I've been tracking your brother and Ramon for 18 months. Lexi's voice came through my speakerphone, clear and professional. We're close to making arrests, but we need more concrete evidence. I sat on my hotel bed, still in my wedding dress, with Eloise beside me. And your marriage to Ramon? Part of my cover. He doesn't know I'm federal. He thinks I'm just another investor he can manipulate. So the marriage certificate Truman showed everyone is real, Lexi confirmed. But it was necessary for the investigation. I never expected him to use it like this. A knock at the door made us jump. Rosalie? My mother's voice. Please open up. I muted the phone. Not now, Mom. Your brother's been arrested. The police are downstairs. Eloise and I exchanged shocked looks. I unmuted the call. Lexi, did you— That wasn't us, she said quickly. Something else must have happened. Where's Ramon? I opened the door to find my mother in tears. What do you mean Truman's been arrested? 2 officers just took him from the hotel bar, she sobbed. Something about financial fraud. Ramon disappeared right after. My phone buzzed with a text from Dallas. Ramon's running. Back parking lot. Hurry. I have to go, I told my mother, already moving toward the elevator. Eloise, stay with her. Rosalie, wait. Lexi's voice came through the phone. Don't confront him alone. But I was already racing down the hallway, my wedding dress hitched up around my knees. In the elevator, I kicked off my heels, leaving them behind as I ran through the lobby in bare feet. The back parking lot was dark except for security lights. I spotted Ramon trying to unlock a car, not his usual vehicle. Running away? I called out. That's not suspicious at all. He spun around. Rosalie, you don't understand. Actually, I understand perfectly. I held up my phone. I have all the evidence, Ramon. The fraud, the money laundering, everything. You talked to Lexi. His face hardened. What did she tell you? Enough to know you're both going to prison. I stepped closer. Unless you want to explain why you and my brother stole my inheritance? Your inheritance? He laughed bitterly. That money was gone long before we touched it. Your father— A car screeched into the parking lot, headlights blazing. Dallas jumped out. Ramon, don't say another word. You betrayed me, Ramon snarled at Dallas. You betrayed yourself, Dallas replied. And her. He nodded toward me. More cars were pulling in now. Police vehicles. Ramon looked around wildly like a trapped animal. It's over, I said quietly. Just tell me why. Why involve me at all? Because we needed a clean account to move the money through. He admitted. Your inheritance made you perfect. Truman said, freeze, hands where we can see them. Officers emerged from the vehicles, weapons drawn. As they handcuffed Ramon, Lexi appeared beside me, badge visible on her belt. You okay? No, I answered honestly. But I will be. Back in the hotel lobby, my mother was waiting with Eloise and several officers. They're saying Truman stole from clients, she whispered. That he and Ramon were running some kind of scheme? They were, Mom. I hugged her tightly. And they used my wedding as cover. Miss? An officer approached. We'll need your statement. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions and statements. I learned that Truman and Ramon had been running a complex fraud scheme, using my inheritance and wedding as legitimate fronts for their illegal activities. They'd planned to disappear after the ceremony, leaving me to deal with the fallout. Around midnight, Eloise brought me a change of clothes. As I finally got out of my wedding dress, my phone buzzed with a message from Truman, sent from the police station. I can still fix this. Don't tell them anything else. I showed the message to Lexi, who'd stayed to help with the investigation. Classic manipulation, she said. He's trying to maintain control. What happens now? Now? She smiled grimly. Now we build an airtight case. With your help, we can make sure they both face consequences for every single thing they've done. I looked at my reflection in the hotel room mirror, barefoot, exhausted, but somehow stronger than I'd been this morning in my wedding dress. They thought they could use me, I said, that I was just some naive little sister who wouldn't figure it out. Their biggest mistake, Eloise added, squeezing my shoulder. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Truman. Family should stick together. I typed back a single response. We're not family anymore. Then I turned to Lexi. Tell me everything you need to know. It's time they learned what happens when you underestimate the wrong woman. Your brother's requesting a meeting, Lexi said, sliding a visitor request form across the table. 1 week had passed since my non-wedding, and we were sitting in the federal building's conference room. Why would I want to see him? Because he's offering to tell us everything about Ramon's overseas accounts, she replied. But he'll only talk to you. I stared at the form. He's trying to make a deal. Most likely. Lexi leaned forward. But we could use this, if you're up for it. Dallas, who'd been helping with the investigation, spoke up from his corner. It's risky. Truman's manipulative. I know my brother. I cut in. And I know exactly how to handle him. 2 hours later, I sat across from Truman in a sterile visitation room. He looked terrible in his orange jumpsuit, exactly as he deserved. You're looking well, he said, attempting his usual smirk. Amazing what getting rid of toxic people can do for your complexion. His smirk faltered. Mom's not taking my calls. Can you blame her? Her son stole from his sister and used her wedding as cover for fraud. I was trying to protect you. Stop. I slammed my hand on the table. No more lies. You want to make a deal? Start with the truth. He glanced at the observation mirror, knowing Lexi and others were watching. Ramon has accounts, offshore, money that could help reduce my sentence. And what do you want in exchange? Your help. He leaned forward. Tell them I was manipulated, that Ramon masterminded everything. I laughed, cutting him off. You really don't get it, do you? I found your old emails, the ones where you pitched this whole scheme to Ramon 2 years ago. His face paled. Did you really think Dallas was the only one with access to those servers? I pulled out my phone, reading from an email. Ramon, the perfect setup just fell into our laps. My sister's inheritance gives us a clean account to work with. Want to hear more? Those emails are inadmissible. Not anymore. The FBI has them now. Legally obtained with a warrant. Truman's facade cracked. You don't understand what you've done. Actually, I do. I stood up. I've made sure my big brother faces consequences for once in his life. Wait. He called as I turned to leave. There's more, about Dad's company. I paused at the door. You mean how you and Ramon were stealing from it before he died? Yeah, we know about that too. Back in the observation room, Lexi was smiling. That rattled him. He'll be more willing to talk now. He's already talking, Dallas added, checking his tablet. Our team just got into the encrypted files he kept on his home server. the ones he thought were safe. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Ramon's wife is at the house. The real one. What? I showed Lexi the message. Impossible, she said. I'm Ramon's only wife. Unless... Dallas pulled up some files. Unless he committed actual bigamy. Not just with Lexi's undercover marriage, but I need to get to my mom's house, I said, already heading for the door. 20 minutes later, I pulled up to find a sleek black car in the driveway. Inside, my mother sat rigid on the couch while a stunning woman paced the living room. You must be Rosalie, the woman said. I'm Victoria, Ramon's wife. His first wife. That's not possible, I replied. Lexi is his second wife, and you would have been his third. Victoria pulled out her phone. I've been tracking him for years. Every time he does this, finds a wealthy woman, arranges a marriage, then disappears with their money. My mother made a choked sound. Years? 5 different women in 3 states, Victoria confirmed. I'm working with authorities in all of them. My phone buzzed again. Lexi. Victoria's story checks out. Ramon's been running marriage scams longer than our investigation. We need her testimony. I looked at Victoria. Why come forward now? Because you're the first one who fought back. She smiled grimly. The others were too embarrassed, too ashamed. But you? You exposed him. And now we can stop him for good. I sank into a chair, processing this new information. Does Truman know about this? Your brother? Victoria checked her notes. He only knew about the financial fraud. Ramon kept his marriage scams separate. My mother finally spoke up. All those business trips Ramon took. He was visiting his other families, Victoria finished. Building other lives, other scams. My phone lit up with another message, this time from Dallas. Ramon's asking for a deal too. Says he'll give up everything on Truman. I showed the message to Victoria. Looks like they're turning on each other. She nodded approvingly. Good. Let them destroy each other. Makes our job easier. Our job? Bringing down every last piece of their operation. She held out her hand. What do you say? Want to help me destroy the man who tried to destroy us? I took her hand, feeling a new sense of purpose. When do we start? They're both requesting plea deals, Lexi announced, spreading files across my dining room table. 3 weeks had passed, and my house had become unofficial headquarters for what the FBI now called Operation Wedding Crash. Victoria pointed to a document. Ramon's offering to reveal his entire network of marriage scams. And Truman's promising to expose every fraudulent transaction. Dallas added. Let them both talk, I said, sorting through the papers. The more they try to save themselves, the more they'll incriminate each other. My doorbell rang. Eloise, who'd been quietly taking notes, went to answer it. She returned with my mother, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Truman's lawyer called, Mom said without preamble. He wants me to testify that Ramon manipulated him into everything. And? I watched her carefully, and I told him to go to hell. She sat down heavily. I've been going through old bank statements. The money your father left for your college fund. Truman stole that too. Victoria handed her a glass of water. Mrs. Moore, we need to talk about the family business accounts. What about them? Your late husband's signature on several transfers. Lexi interjected gently. They appear to be forged. Mom's hand shook as she took a sip. Truman had power of attorney after your father's stroke. He handled everything. Including this, Dallas said, pulling up a document on his laptop. A transfer of $500,000 to Ramon's shell company, dated 2 days after your husband passed. I watched my mother's face crumple. He didn't even wait for Dad to be buried. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Ramon's mother, looking equally devastated. I found these, she said, placing a stack of wedding invitations on the table. In Ramon's storage unit. Different names, different cities. Victoria picked them up, nodding grimly. He used the same printer I did for our wedding. Same design, just changed the names. 5 weddings in 3 years, Lexi confirmed, each time targeting women with significant assets or inheritances. My phone buzzed. A text from Truman. Mom's not answering. Tell her I need bail money. Family helps family. Still trying to manipulate, Eloise observed, reading over my shoulder. Speaking of manipulation, Dallas said, Ramon's lawyer reached out. Says he has information about other conspirators. More people involved? I asked. A network of wedding planners, jewelers, even caterers, Lexi explained. All in on the scam, all taking a cut. The same vendors he suggested for our wedding, I realized. They were all part of it? Every single one, Victoria confirmed. They help legitimize the weddings, then participate in the money laundering afterward. Another text from Truman. You're making a mistake. I protected you your whole life. Protected me? I said aloud. By stealing my inheritance, my college fund? Dad's money? He's desperate, Lexi noted. They both are. Their whole operation is crumbling. My mother stood suddenly. I need to see him. Mom, no, not to help him, she said firmly. To tell him exactly what I think of what he's done. Ramon's mother nodded. I'll go with you. I have some things to say to my son as well. After they left, Victoria spread out more documents. We need to move quickly. Once word gets out about their arrests, their other accomplices will start covering their tracks. Already happening, Dallas reported, checking his phone. The wedding planner from your ceremony just bought a plane ticket to Mexico. Not anymore, Lexi said, making a call. This is Agent Phillips. I need that flight flagged. I stepped out onto my porch, needing air. Eloise followed. You okay? I should be devastated, I said. My brother's a criminal. My fiancé is a serial con man. My whole wedding was a front for fraud. But all I feel is angry and ready to make them pay. My phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. This is just the beginning. Wait until the press finds out about your family's involvement. I showed it to Eloise, who immediately called Lexi outside. Ramon's threatening to drag your family through the mud? Lexi said, reading the text. Classic deflection tactic. Let him try, I replied, walking back inside. Victoria, show me those wedding vendor lists again. I think I know how we can track down every single person involved in their scams. As we gathered around the table, I felt a grim satisfaction. Ramon and Truman thought they could use my wedding to cover their crimes. Instead, they'd given me everything I needed to destroy their entire operation. Where do we start? Dallas asked. I picked up the stack of fake wedding invitations. We start by showing them what happens when you mess with the wrong bride. The courthouse buzzed with tension as I took the witness stand. 2 months of investigation had led to this moment. The preliminary hearing that would determine if Ramon and Truman would face trial. Please state your name for the record, the prosecutor began. Rosalie Morgan. And your relationship to the defendants? Truman is my brother. Ramon was my fiancé. Ramon sat at the defense table wearing an ill-fitting suit, while Truman slouched beside his own lawyer. Both avoided my gaze. Ms. Morgan, when did you first become aware of the defendant's fraudulent activities? At my wedding, I said clearly. When my brother exposed Ramon's marriage to an undercover federal agent. Objection. Ramon's lawyer stood. The witness is speculating about... Your Honor? The prosecutor interrupted. We have Agent Phillips here to testify about her undercover role. Overruled, the judge said. Continue. I detailed everything. The stolen inheritance, the forged signatures, the network of corrupt wedding vendors. With each revelation, I watched Truman sink lower in his chair. And this document. The prosecutor held up an email. Can you identify it? That's an email from my brother to Ramon, planning how to use my wedding as cover for their money laundering operation. Ramon's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, my client was merely... Merely what? I cut in, my voice sharp. Merely planning to marry me while already married to 2 other women? Merely stealing my inheritance? Merely Ms. Morgan, the judge warned, please respond only to questions asked. Sorry, Your Honor. The prosecutor continued, what happened when you confronted your brother about the fraud? He tried to blackmail me, said he'd ruin our family's reputation if I didn't stay quiet. In the gallery, I heard my mother's soft sob. Victoria sat beside her, offering silent support. And Mr. Ramon's response when confronted? He ran, literally tried to flee the scene before being arrested. Ramon finally looked at me, his face a mask of practiced innocence. I stared back until he looked away first. The prosecution calls Victoria Ramon, the judge announced. As I left the stand, Victoria squeezed my hand before taking my place. For the next hour, she methodically detailed Ramon's history of marriage scams, complete with documentation of every fraudulent wedding. During a brief recess, Lexi pulled me aside. They're cracking. Ramon's lawyer just approached us about a plea deal. What's he offering? Full cooperation against Truman and the entire vendor network, in exchange for a reduced sentence. And Truman? Still playing tough, but she checked her phone. Hold that thought. His lawyer's calling now. Dallas joined us, tablet in hand. The wedding planner just confessed, gave up everyone involved in the scheme. Back in the courtroom, the evidence mounted. Bank records, forged documents, witness testimonies, it all painted a picture of elaborate fraud spanning years. Then came the moment that broke Truman completely. The prosecutor played a video recording from my father's hospital room, taken days before his death. In it, Truman promised to protect the family's assets, to look after me, to honor Dad's wishes. Your Honor, Truman's lawyer stood suddenly. My client wishes to change his plea. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Ramon's lawyer quickly followed suit. Both defendants wish to enter guilty pleas? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor, they replied in unison. As the judge detailed the plea agreements, I felt Eloise's hand on my shoulder. It's really over, she whispered. But I wasn't done. I stood up. Your Honor, before you accept their pleas, there's something else. The judge nodded. Proceed. I turned to face my brother and ex-fiancé. You didn't just steal money. You stole trust. You stole family. You stole memories that should have been real. No plea deal can fix that. Ms. Morgan, the judge said gently, are you opposing the plea agreements? No, Your Honor. I just want them to know that while they're sitting in their cells, I'll be working with every one of their victims. We're going to rebuild what they destroyed, and we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly who they really are. Truman finally spoke up. Rosalie, please. No, I cut him off. You don't get to beg anymore. You're not my brother. You're just another criminal who picked the wrong target. The judge called for order as Ramon and Truman were led away. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Ready for this? Lexi asked. I straightened my shoulders, Victoria and my mother flanking me. Time to tell the real story. No more secrets, no more lies. As we pushed through the courthouse doors, cameras flashing, I realized this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. A chance to help other victims, to expose other scammers, to turn my ruined wedding into something meaningful. Ms. Morgan, reporters called out. What do you want people to know? I stepped up to the microphones, ready to speak my truth. Another one? Eloise handed me a letter as I walked into my office at the Fraud Victims Advocacy Center. Third this week, I confirmed, recognizing the prison letterhead. Truman's getting desperate now that his appeal was denied. Want me to shred it like the others? No. I sat at my desk, opening the envelope. Let's see what creative excuse my brother has today. The letter was shorter than usual, just 3 lines. I'm sorry, I know that's not enough, but it's all I have left to give. At least he's finally being honest, Eloise said, reading over my shoulder. My phone buzzed, Victoria calling. You're not going to believe this, she said when I answered. Ramon's mother just turned over all his offshore account information. Says she found it hidden in their family vacation home. How much? Millions, and a list of every victim going back 6 years. I put her on speaker as Lexi walked in. Perfect timing, Lexi said. We just got approval to expand the victim recovery program nationwide. Speaking of recovery, Dallas called from his desk across the office. The wedding planner's testimony just helped us bust another ring in Miami. Same scam, different players. I pinned Ramon's latest victim list to our evidence board, next to dozens of other photos and documents. What had started as my personal nightmare had grown into something bigger. A nationwide operation to expose wedding fraud schemes and help victims recover. Your mother's here, Eloise said softly. Mom stood in the doorway, looking stronger than she had in months. The house sold, she announced, above asking price. The family home, too full of memories and lies to keep. The proceeds would help repay some of what Truman had stolen from Dad's estate. Also, she continued, I've been talking to other parents, people whose children did what Truman did. We're starting a support group. That's amazing, Mom. It helps, she said simply. Turning pain into purpose, my phone buzzed again. A text from Ramon's latest almost victim, a woman we'd warned just in time. He showed up at my sister's wedding. Police got him. Add another violation of parole to his record, Lexi noted, already making calls. Victoria walked in, carrying files. Ready for the support group meeting? We have 3 new members. Women he tried to marry? 2 of them. The third is someone Truman scammed through the family business. I gathered my materials for the meeting, including the journal where we tracked every victory, every recovered dollar, every prevented fraud. The same journal that had started with my own ruined wedding day. Ms. Morgan? A young woman appeared in the doorway, clutching a wedding invitation. I think my fiancé might be... Come in, I said warmly, recognizing the fear and doubt in her eyes. You're safe here. Tell us everything. As she spoke, my team moved with practiced efficiency. Eloise started background checks, Dallas traced financial records, Victoria pulled similar case files. I feel so stupid, the woman whispered. No, I said firmly. They're the stupid ones, because every time they try this scam, we'll be here, and we'll stop them. My phone lit up with a message from the prison warden. Ramon requesting another meeting. Says he has more names. Good, I replied, because we have more evidence. The young woman looked at our evidence board with wide eyes. How do you do this every day? Work with these constant reminders? I showed her the other side of the office, our success board. Photos of reunited families, recovered assets, prevented frauds. Headlines announcing arrests, convictions, restitutions. Because every reminder is also a lesson, I explained. And every lesson helps us protect someone else. Mom joined us, putting an arm around the young woman. Come on, the support group is about to start. You'll see you're not alone. As they left, I looked around at my team. At Eloise's determined focus, Victoria's quiet strength, Lexi's unwavering dedication, Dallas's meticulous research. At the office that had grown from my personal quest for justice into a refuge for others. Another letter from the prison, Eloise said, handing me an envelope. But this time, I dropped it unopened into my desk drawer. Truman's words didn't matter anymore. Neither did Ramon's manipulations or their endless excuses. What mattered was the woman in the support group, finding her strength. The evidence board, telling its truth. The team around me, fighting the good fight. They thought they could break me with their betrayal. Instead, they gave me a purpose. A mission. A way to turn their destruction into something constructive. Ready for the next case? Lexi asked. I picked up my files, straightened my shoulders, and nodded. Always ready. Let's get to work.